Hello, soul-igniting story fam. Buckle up because today's tale is packed with sweetness and swoon-worthy magic. Let's jump straight into the story. The day Cassia Donovan publicly disowned her billionaire father, Brady Donovan stood alone in his penthouse, watching his daughter's face flash across every news channel in America. Neither of them knew that hidden corruption would soon force them to question everything they believed about each other and the woman they both loved. The New York skyline stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a testament to the empire Brady had built from nothing. 62 stories below, protesters gathered with signs bearing his daughter's face and the words that now haunted him. Donovan and no more. "How dare she?" he whispered, his voice hollow in the empty room. The remote trembled in his hand before he clicked off the television, plunging the penthouse into silence. 3,000 miles away, in a cramped apartment filled with environmental activism posters and half-packed boxes, Cassia Donovan, now Cassia Ventron, stared at her phone as notifications flooded in. 10,000 shares. 20,000. Her hands shook as she set the device face down on the counter. "You okay?" her partner asked, sliding a cup of tea across the table. "I just cut ties with $50 billion, and the only family I have left," Cassia replied, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "I've never been better." But beneath her conviction lay a question neither father nor daughter could yet face. Was this truly about principles or pain? Family rifts happen every day across America. Parents and children stop speaking over politics, lifestyle choices, perceived betrayals. But when your last name is attached to buildings, when your family disagreements make national headlines, when your inheritance could fund entire movements, the personal becomes something else entirely. For the Donovans, this wasn't just about a father and daughter who couldn't see eye to eye. This was about legacy, about power, about the true cost of wealth accumulated across decades, about whether redemption is possible when mistakes are made on a scale that affects thousands of lives. "I will not inherit blood money," Cassia had written in her viral post. "I choose people over profit, earth over exploitation. I am my mother's daughter, not yours." The words cut Brady deeper than any business rival ever had, deeper than the board members who questioned his leadership, deeper than the financial analysts who doubted his vision when he was building Donovan Holdings from a startup in his garage to a Fortune 100 giant. Because Cassia wasn't wrong. Not entirely. But she didn't know the full story either. Brady's empire stretched across 5 continents, 42 subsidiaries, and employed over 30,000 people. The Donovan Family Foundation donated millions annually to causes Brady's late wife had championed. From the outside, it was a gleaming monument to American success. The self-made man, the philanthropist, the visionary. But inside those gleaming towers, something was rotting. Something Brady himself had failed to see, blinded by spreadsheets and quarterly projections. Something that would eventually bring both father and daughter to their knees. What neither of them realized as they nursed their wounds on opposite coasts. The corrupt executives who had infiltrated Donovan Holdings weren't just destroying the company. They had already altered the course of the Donovan family history years before. The truth about Antonia Donovan's final wishes lay buried in falsified documents, in intercepted letters, in betrayals so deep they had carved the very canyon that now separated father and daughter. For 2 years, they would live separate lives. Brady, the titan of industry, slowly buckling under the weight of secrets he didn't even know he carried. Cassia, the passionate activist, building her own legacy while fighting the shadow of the name she'd rejected, until the day Brady collapsed during a board meeting and everything changed. This isn't just another tale of the rich and famous falling from grace. This is a story about the courage it takes to question your own life's work, about the humility required to admit when you've been wrong, and the strength needed to forgive those who hurt you most. This is about the journey home, even when home has been torn apart. Have you ever wondered what happens when family wounds collide with unimaginable wealth? If you've ever struggled with forgiveness or reconciliation, this story will shake you. Hit subscribe and the notification bell now to join thousands discovering the truth behind America's most private family feud. Because sometimes the greatest fortune isn't measured in dollars. Sometimes it's found in the hardest words to say. "I was wrong. I forgive you. Let's try again." And for Brady and Cassia Donovan, those words would cost and create more than billions ever could. North Philadelphia, 1982. A 17-year-old Brady Donovan stood in the rain outside the loading dock of Harrington Shipping. His second-hand dress shoes soaked through, knuckles raw from knocking on doors all day. "Kid, we don't need no help," the foreman said, not unkindly. "Try the warehouse on Delaware Avenue." Brady nodded, memorizing the address. It would be the 14th rejection that week. But unlike the other applicants trudging home defeated, Brady took notes after each no. What time managers took lunch breaks, which companies seemed understaffed, where trucks idled longest during loading. He wasn't looking for a job. He was studying an industry. Born to a postal worker father and a mother who cleaned offices at night, Brady grew up understanding two things clearly. Hard work rarely made you rich, and systems, not individuals, held the real power. While other teenagers dreamed of escaping Philadelphia, Brady obsessively mapped its commercial arteries, recognizing patterns his classmates couldn't see. "The problem isn't the labor," he told his skeptical father over dinner. "It's the inefficiency. Goods sit too long between handoffs. Information doesn't flow with the products." His father nodded politely, having heard his son's theories for years. "That's nice, Brady. Eat your potatoes before they get cold." 3 years later, while his high school friends partied through college, Brady used his meager savings to lease a tiny office above a laundromat. Donovan Logistics Solutions began with one computer, one phone line, and one revolutionary idea. Software that tracks shipments across multiple carriers, predicting delays before they happened. At first, no one listened. Then Allied Manufacturing, bleeding money from supply chain disruptions, gave the scrappy 20-year-old a chance out of desperation. Within 6 months, Allied's delivery times improved by 32%. Within a year, Brady had 7 clients. Within 3, he employed 14 programmers and analysts. He never raises his voice, one early employee recalled years later. But when Brady speaks, everyone leans in. It's like he can see around corners the rest of us can't. The nickname Quiet Coyote emerged during negotiations with Transcontinental Freight in 1995. Executives from the shipping giant arrived expecting to intimidate the young upstart. Instead, they found Brady waiting silently, absorbing every word, asking precise questions that revealed he already knew their weaknesses. He walked away with a contract triple the size his team had hoped for. "Never show your teeth until you're ready to bite" became an unofficial company motto. Brady built his reputation on listening more than speaking, on knowing competitors' vulnerabilities before entering meetings, on striking when others least expected. By 30, Brady had revolutionized logistics tracking across North America. By 35, Donovan Holdings had expanded into international shipping, supply chain finance, and transportation technology. The scrappy startup had transformed into a corporate force with headquarters in Manhattan's financial district. It was there at a charity gala for urban education that Brady met Antonia Venturon. Unlike the society women who circled him once his net worth hit 9 figures, Antonia wasn't impressed by Brady's growing empire. The daughter of Italian immigrants who built a respected architecture firm, she challenged him immediately. "Your new building in Chicago displaced an entire neighborhood arts district," she said, refusing the champagne he offered. "Was that factored into your expansion costs?" Instead of dismissing her criticism, Brady was intrigued. "No," he admitted. "Tell me what I missed." Their conversation lasted until the venue staff began stacking chairs. 2 months later, they were inseparable. Antonia's warmth and social consciousness balanced Brady's analytical mind. Where he saw efficiency metrics, she saw human impact. Where he calculated risk-reward ratios, she evaluated community consequences. "You make me better," Brady told her the night he proposed, 1 year after they met. "You make me see what my spreadsheets don't show." Their wedding made the business pages rather than society columns. Brady's preference for privacy already evident. Rather than a lavish ceremony, they opted for an intimate gathering at Antonia's family home in Connecticut. The following Monday, Brady was back at his desk as if nothing had changed. But inside Donovan Holdings, everything was transforming. Antonia's influence softened Brady's harder edges. The company established family leave policies well beyond legal requirements. Sustainability initiatives became part of logistics planning. The Donovan Family Foundation launched with a focus on education and community development in cities where they operated. "My wife believes wealth carries responsibility," Brady told his board, some of whom grumbled about the foundation's growing budget. "I agree with her." When Antonia announced her pregnancy 3 years into their marriage, Brady approached parenthood with the same meticulous planning he applied to business acquisitions. The nursery was perfectly designed, college funds established, even a succession plan drafted, though the baby hadn't yet been born. "You can't engineer a child like a company," Antonia laughed, rubbing her growing belly. "This little one will have her own ideas." How prophetic those words would prove to be. Cassia Antonia Donovan arrived on a stormy April morning in 2000. Brady, who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, found himself completely undone by 5 pounds, 6 ounces of new life. For a man who built his reputation on control and calculation, the overwhelming love he felt was disorienting. "She's perfect," he whispered, holding his daughter for the first time. In that moment, Brady made a private vow. Cassia would have everything he didn't: security, opportunity, a legacy beyond anything he could imagine. What Brady couldn't see, his fatal blind spot both as a father and a CEO, was that his definition of everything might not match his daughter's, or that the very empire he was building for her would one day become the thing she most rejected. As Donovan Holdings expanded through the early 2000s, Brady's management style evolved. He promoted brilliant problem solvers who delivered results, often overlooking character flaws if numbers looked good. His renowned attention to detail focused increasingly on strategy and growth, while day-to-day operations fell to a widening circle of executives he trusted but rarely questioned. "Brady wants outcomes, not process reports," became the understanding among senior leadership. This approach drove innovation and expansion, but created shadows where accountability disappeared, shadows that would later harbor corruption. While Brady built towers of glass and steel across global skylines, he spent evenings reading bedtime stories to Cassia, teaching her to ride a bike in Central Park, explaining math concepts at the kitchen table. These were the moments that mattered most, the life he and Antonia created away from boardrooms and balance sheets. "We built something good," he told Antonia on their 10th anniversary, looking out over the Manhattan skyline from their penthouse. "Something that will last." She squeezed his hand and smiled, but something wistful crossed her face, a hesitation he was too busy to notice. The fractured lines in their perfect world had already begun to form, invisible but deepening. In time, they would threaten everything Brady had built, everything he thought he understood, including the daughter who watched and learned from his every move. Cassia Donovan grew up in a world where possibility had no limits. While other children visited zoos, 7-year-old Cassia accompanied her parents to wildlife reserves across 4 continents. While classmates went to summer camp, she attended global youth leadership conferences. Her childhood bedroom overlooked Central Park, an emerald rectangle amid concrete that she often stared at, wondering why such spaces were so rare in the city she called home. "Why can't there be more trees?" she asked her mother one evening as they gazed out the window. Antonia smiled, brushing Cassia's dark hair back from her forehead. "That's a question worth asking your whole life, my love." From her earliest years, Cassia displayed a fierce sense of justice that both delighted and occasionally embarrassed her parents. At 9, she organized her private school classmates to boycott the cafeteria until it eliminated plastic straws. At 11, she donated her entire birthday gift budget to hurricane relief, asking guests to bring only letters describing good deeds they performed instead of presents. "Your daughter has an unusual perspective," teachers would tell Brady and Antonia during conferences. "She sees problems most children her age never notice." Brady took pride in these reports, viewing Cassia's moral certainty as a sign of leadership potential. Antonia recognized something deeper, a genuine empathy that couldn't be taught or manufactured. "She feels everything so intensely," Antonia confided to Brady one night after Cassia had spent hours researching homeless youth initiatives for a school project. "It's beautiful, but I worry sometimes." The world can be cruel to people who care that much. She'll learn to channel it. Brady assured his wife. Passion with direction becomes power. He imagined Cassia eventually bringing her idealism to Donovan Holdings, perhaps leading their corporate social responsibility division before taking on larger roles. A perfect blend of her mother's heart and his strategic mind. Cassia had different ideas forming, though she couldn't yet articulate them. While she enjoyed the privileged life her father's success provided, something about it made her increasingly uncomfortable, a disconnection between the values her parents espoused at home and the realities of the business world her father dominated. When Cassia was 12, she overheard a conversation between her father and a senior vice president about closing a distribution center in Michigan. The community impact is unfortunate, the executive said, but the quarterly numbers don't justify keeping it open. Find positions for the senior staff at other locations, Brady replied. Make the severance packages generous. But yes, proceed with the closure. Later that evening, Cassia asked her father about the people who would lose their jobs. Brady seemed surprised by her question, but answered carefully. Business sometimes requires difficult decisions, Cass. We're being responsible to thousands of other employees by making the company stronger. What about being responsible to those families in Michigan? She pressed. Her father studied her face. You sound like your mother, he said finally, his tone a mixture of pride and something else, perhaps concern. The divide between father and daughter might remain a philosophical one, bridged by their deep family bond, if tragedy hadn't intervened 2 years later. Antonia Donovan's diagnosis came suddenly, aggressive breast cancer, already metastasized by the time symptoms appeared. The woman who had been the family's emotional center, the bridge between Brady's corporate world and Cassia's developing conscience, declined rapidly despite access to the world's best medical care. Money can't buy everything. Cassia overheard a nurse murmur outside her mother's hospital room. In the 6 months between diagnosis and death, Antonia spent every moment of strength she had with her daughter. They talked for hours, Antonia seemingly determined to compress a lifetime of guidance into a heartbreakingly brief window. Your compassion is your greatest gift, Antonia told Cassia during one of their final conversations. Never let anyone convince you that caring too much is a weakness. It's your superpower. When 14-year-old Cassia stood beside her father at the funeral, photographers from business publications captured images that would later resurface in profiles of both Donovans. The stoic seal gripping his daughter's shoulder, the girl's face streaked with tears she made no attempt to hide. What the photos couldn't show was a fundamental difference in how father and daughter processed their grief. Brady retreated into work, spending longer hours at the office, expanding Donovan Holdings at an unprecedented rate, as if outrunning his pain through acquisition and growth. Cassia turned inward, filling journals with questions her mother could no longer answer, searching for meaning in the randomness of loss. The first Christmas without Antonia, Brady suggested a trip to their winter home in Aspen. Cassia declined. I'm volunteering at the women's shelter, she explained. They need help with their holiday program. Brady nodded, already checking emails on his phone. That's thoughtful, Cass. Your mother would be proud. They spent the holidays separately, the first of many family occasions they would experience apart in the coming years. By 16, Cassia had transformed her grief into action. She launched a foundation at her high school that paired student volunteers with environmental cleanup projects across New York City. She organized classmates to pressure the school board into divesting from fossil fuel companies. Her college application essays focused not on her father's achievements or family name, but on her vision for corporate responsibility in a warming world. I believe businesses can be powerful forces for positive change, she wrote, but only if profit isn't their sole purpose. Brown University offered her early admission, attracted not by the Donovan name, but by Cassia's impressive record of activism and academic excellence. When she left for Providence, Brady seemed relieved. Their conversations had grown increasingly strained, with Cassia questioning business practices Brady considered standard and necessary. College will give her perspective, he told his executive assistant. She'll understand the real world better when she graduates. He couldn't have been more wrong. At Brown, Cassia found her tribe, passionate students who shared her concerns about climate change, economic inequality, and corporate accountability. She double-majored in environmental studies and ethics, joining the campus chapter of climate justice now during her first semester. By sophomore year, she led it, but the fire in Cassia's eyes wasn't just idealism. It hit a wound that began the day her mother's casket was lowered into the ground. Every corporate villain in her speeches, every system she fought to change, carried shadows of her father's world. Every campaign contained an unspoken question. Would Antonia be proud of her? Or of the empire Brady continue to build in her absence? During her junior year, Cassia organized her first major protest against Atlantic Global Partners, a multinational corporation with documented pollution violations across South America. The demonstration drew hundreds of students and significant media attention, including, inevitably, mentions of her father's similar business holdings. How does Brady Donovan feel about his daughter's activism? A reporter shouted as Cassia led chants on the campus quad. She paused, microphone in hand, a moment of decision crossing her face before she answered. You'd have to ask him. I'm here as Cassia, not as a Donovan. The quote appeared in business publications nationwide, alongside speculation about family tension. Brady, true to form, offered no comment when asked about his daughter's growing public profile as a corporate critic. Privately, he sent her a text. Be careful about statements to the press. People will use you to get to me. Her reply came hours later. Not everything is about you, Dad. Their relationship continued to fray. Communication limited to holiday phone calls and occasional tense dinners when Cassia visited New York. The gulf between them widened with each passing semester. Each protest Cassia organized, each acquisition Brady celebrated. By senior year, Cassia had made a name for herself separate from her father's. Environmental organizations recruited her for leadership positions after graduation. Fellow activists looked to her for guidance, never mentioning the irony of a billionaire's daughter leading anti-corporate movements. Do you know someone torn between family loyalty and their deepest values? Share this video with them. Sometimes seeing others navigate impossible choices gives us courage to face our own. For Cassia Donovan, that impossible choice was approaching faster than she knew, and it would happen at the place that should have felt safest. Home. The Donovan penthouse fell silent in ways that had nothing to do with sound. Though the housekeeper still prepared meals, though Brady's phone still rang with business calls, though occasional guests still visited for corporate functions, an emptiness pervaded every room after Antonia's death. We should redecorate, Brady suggested 6 months after the funeral, standing in the living room that still held Antonia's favorite reading chair, her collection of art books, her hand-picked sculptures from global travels. Fresh start. 14-year-old Cassia looked up from her mother's worn copy of environmental essays, horror crossing her face. No, Cass, it might help us both move. I said no. Her voice broke on the second word. Brady retreated, both physically and emotionally. He'd never felt so helpless. Not during the early struggling years of his company. Not during difficult negotiations. Not even during Antonia's rapid decline. His daughter's grief was a territory he couldn't navigate with spreadsheets or strategy. So he did what successful men often do when confronted with problems they can't solve. He turned to what he could control. Donovan Holdings expanded aggressively in the years following Antonia's death. Brady worked 18-hour days, returning home long after Cassia had gone to bed. When a Tokyo acquisition required his presence for 3 weeks, he arranged for his sister to stay with Cassia rather than bring his daughter along as he and Antonia would have done previously. You'll be more comfortable here with your school friends, he explained, packing his suitcase while Cassia watched from his bedroom doorway. Mom would have taken me, she said quietly, Brady's hand still briefly on his folded shirts. I'm not Mom. Those 3 words, simple, factual, devoid of intentional cruelty, crystallized a new reality for both of them. Brady wasn't Antonia. He couldn't fill the emotional void her absence created. And with each passing month, he seemed less inclined to try. Cassia's 15th birthday arrived. While Brady was closing a major deal in Singapore, he sent an extravagant gift, a limited edition camera she'd mentioned wanting, but missed the actual celebration. when he suggested making it up to her the following weekend. Cassia already had plans with her environmental club. Maybe next month, she offered, the rain check becoming a pattern they both recognized but neither acknowledged. The physical distance between father and daughter reflected their emotional separation. While Brady claimed the top-floor home office as his domain, Cassia retreated to her bedroom or the building's rooftop garden that Antonia had designed. Meals together became increasingly rare, with Brady often eating at his desk and Cassia preferring the kitchen counter to the formal dining room. Their conversations, when they occurred, took on a transactional quality. Updates on school grades or business developments rather than the warm exchanges that had characterized family discussions when Antonia was alive. My environmental science teacher thinks I should apply for a summer program at Columbia. Cassia mentioned one rare evening when they both found themselves in the kitchen. Brady nodded approvingly. Columbia's business connections would be valuable. Good thinking. It's not a business program, Dad. It's ecological research. Still, name recognition matters on college applications. Cassia didn't bother correcting his misunderstanding. The gap between what she cared about and what her father valued seemed to widen with each interaction. By the time Cassia turned 16, the household staff saw more of her daily life than Brady did. Her passion for environmental causes intensified, providing both purpose and community when family connection faltered. Where once Brady had attended her school events and activities, now his assistant sent congratulatory flowers or arranged for town cars to transport her to functions. The summer before her junior year of high school, Cassia joined a youth climate delegation to a United Nations forum in Geneva. Brady approved the trip without much discussion, arranging first-class travel and accommodations at Switzerland's finest hotel. When Cassia returned, animated by the experience and eager to share what she'd learned, she found her father hosting a dinner party for executives from a paper manufacturing conglomerate, a company named in the conference as a significant contributor to deforestation. "How was your trip?" Brady asked during a brief moment between courses. "Illuminating," Cassia replied, glancing meaningfully at his guests. "I learned exactly which corporations are most responsible for environmental destruction." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Brady quickly changed the subject to European market opportunities, shooting his daughter a warning look she deliberately ignored. Later that night, he knocked on her bedroom door. "Those people are important business partners," he said, without preamble. "Your comments were inappropriate." Cassia looked up from her laptop, where she was organizing photos from the climate conference. "You asked about my trip. I told you what I learned. There's a time and place for personal views, Cassia." "Personal views?" Her voice rose slightly. "We're talking about scientific facts. That company's practices have destroyed over 50,000 acres of old-growth forests." Brady pinched the bridge of his nose. "The world is more complicated than your climate conferences suggest. These companies employ thousands of people. They support entire communities, while destroying the planet those communities live on. This isn't a debate I'm going to have right now." Brady turned to leave, then paused. "Your mother believed in finding balance, in working with businesses to improve practices, not just condemning them." The mention of Antonia hit Cassia like a physical blow. "Don't tell me what Mom would think," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You don't get to use her that way." The door closed between them with finality that extended beyond the physical barrier. As Cassia progressed through high school, her academic achievements and leadership activities earned praise from teachers and college admissions officers. Brady attended parent conferences and graduation, expressing appropriate pride in her accomplishments. To outsiders, they presented a united front, the successful businessman and his talented daughter. But those closest of family noticed the carefully maintained distance, the way Cassia stiffened when her father entered a room, the manner in which Brady checked his watch during her environmental presentations at school events. They orbit each other without connecting, her high school counselor observed to a colleague, like planets with opposing gravitational pulls. When college acceptance letters arrived, Cassia's decision to attend Brown University rather than her father's alma mater or one of the business-focused schools he preferred marked another divergence in their paths. Brady, to his credit, respected her choice, even as he misinterpreted her reasons for making it. Brown has an excellent economics department, he noted when writing the first tuition check. Their business connections in the Northeast are unparalleled. Cassia didn't correct him. What would be the point? Her interests in environmental studies and ethics had been clear for years, but Brady saw what he wanted to see, a daughter following a more acceptable version of his footsteps. Their most honest conversation during those years came unexpectedly, late one night during Cassia's freshman year at college. She returned home for Thanksgiving break to find the penthouse transformed for a holiday party, Donovan Holdings' annual client appreciation event. Amid the crowd of business associates, Cassia felt like a stranger in her own home. She retreated to the rooftop garden, where Brady found her staring out at the city lights. "You should come downstairs," he said. "People are asking about you." "They're asking about Brady Donovan's daughter," she corrected. "Not me." Something in her tone made him really look at her, perhaps for the first time in years. "Is that how you feel?" "That no one sees you." The direct question, so unlike their usual careful conversations, caught her off guard. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Even you." Brady leaned against the garden railing. "I see you, Cassia. I see your passion, your intelligence, your mother's determination in everything you do. But you don't understand why I care about the things I do. I understand that you're young, that you want to change the world." He paused. "I wanted that once too. What happened?" "Life. Responsibility. Building something that lasts." He gestured toward the skyline, where several buildings bore the Donovan name. "I created this for you." The irony hung between them, that the empire he built as a legacy was precisely what pushed her away. Neither knew how to bridge that fundamental disconnect. "I never asked for buildings, Dad," she said finally. "I wanted something else." "What?" But Cassia couldn't articulate what she'd lost. Not just her mother, but the father who had once read her bedtime stories, who had taught her question and think critically, who had somehow become a stranger while living under the same roof. "It doesn't matter now," she said, turning back toward the party. "We should rejoin your guests." The moment of potential connection closed as quickly as it had opened. They descended to the penthouse separately, resuming their public roles with practiced ease. As Cassia's college activism intensified, so did the tension between father and daughter. News articles about her protests occasionally mentioned her relationship to Brady Donovan, creating public relations challenges his team scrambled to manage. Their phone calls grew shorter and less frequent. Holiday gatherings became exercises in mutual avoidance. The seeds of their eventual confrontation were planted long before that fateful summer in the Berkshires, in every misconnection, in every conversation that ended before it truly began, in the growing certainty on both sides that the other would never truly understand. Has a family relationship ever exploded in your life? What would it take for you to forgive someone who publicly humiliated you? Comment below with your thoughts. The Donovan summer estate in the Berkshires stood as a testament to old money, though Brady himself was anything but. He'd purchased a 19th century mansion 15 years earlier, a self-made man trophy and a peaceful retreat for Antonia, who loved the property's sprawling gardens and forest views. Now, as summer light filtered through ancient oak trees, staff prepared for what business publications would later call the most consequential weekend in Donovan Holdings history. Brady had planned the announcement meticulously. After 30 years building his empire at 53, he would announce his phased retirement and succession plans. 200 guests had been invited, board members, key executives, financial partners, and select media representatives. The official story was a summer gathering, but industry insiders knew something momentous was coming. The stock price would jump 5 points on Monday, Brady's CFO predicted as they reviewed final arrangements. The succession timeline is exactly what investors want to see. And the foundation announcement? Brady asked, reviewing the weekend agenda, scheduled for Saturday dinner. The press packet includes full details on the expanded Antonia Donovan Foundation initiatives. Brady nodded, satisfied. Everything was proceeding according to plan, except for one uncertainty. "Has Cassia confirmed her arrival time?" he asked his assistant. "Ms. Donovan's message indicated she'll be here for dinner, sir. She mentioned bringing a guest." Brady frowned slightly. Cassia hadn't mentioned companion, during their brief phone conversation the previous week. Then again, their communications had become increasingly perfunctory, necessary exchanges of information rather than actual conversations. What Brady didn't know was that Cassia had nearly declined the invitation entirely. Now 23 and recently graduated from Brown, she had just returned from an intensive summer leading environmental protests in the Pacific Northwest. The timing of her father's gathering couldn't have been worse, directly conflicting with the launch week of her new nonprofit, Green Rise. "You should go," her partner Aster had urged. "Whatever he's announcing, it affects you." "Nothing he does affects me anymore," Cassia insisted, but ultimately relented. "Fine, but you're coming with me. I'm not facing that crowd alone." The couple arrived late Friday afternoon, their hybrid car looking decidedly modest among the luxury vehicles lining the estate's circular driveway. Cassia, her dark hair pulled back in a simple braid, wore a linen dress that contrasted sharply with the designer outfits of other guests. Beside her, Aster, tall, non-binary, with close-cropped hair and an Ecological Research Institute logo tattooed on one forearm, drew curious glances from board member spouses. Brady greeted them in the grand foyer, his carefully neutral expression betraying no reaction to Aster's presence. "Cassia, glad you could make it." He extended his hand to Aster. "Brady Donovan." "Aster Quinn," they replied, shaking his hand firmly. "Environmental systems analyst. I've studied your company's impact assessments extensively." An awkward silence followed, broken when Brady's assistant appeared to show them to their room. Singular, Brady noted, another piece of information his daughter hadn't shared. "Dinner is at 7, he informed them. Business casual. As they followed the assistant upstairs, whispers trailed in their wake. Most guests knew of Cassia only through Brady's infrequent mentions or occasional news articles about campus activism. Her arrival with Aster, whose research credentials were well known in environmental circles, sent a clear message that many interpreted as deliberate provocation. In their assigned room, Cassia paced nervously. "Everyone's staring." This was a mistake. "They're staring because you're Brady Donovan's daughter," Aster pointed out, unpacking their clothes. "You knew that would happen." "I'm more than that." "Of course you are." Aster caught her hand mid-pace. "That's exactly why we're here. To show them who Cassia Donovan really is." By 7 o'clock, the estate's formal dining room gleamed with crystal, silver, and old-world opulence. 60 guests took assigned seats at tables arranged to facilitate business connections and strategic conversations. Brady had placed Cassia and Aster at his own table, a gesture of family unity that would soon prove catastrophic. The first 2 courses proceeded with practiced social pleasantries. Cassia responded politely to questions about her recent graduation, carefully avoiding mentions of her environmental activism. Brady delivered welcome remarks that hinted at exciting announcements to come on Saturday. Executive vice presidents shared measured anecdotes designed to highlight company successes. The breaking point came during the main course, when conversation turned to Donovan Holdings' recent acquisition of Pacific Northwest Timber, a company Cassia's protest group had targeted for clear-cutting practices just weeks earlier. The regulatory hurdles were substantial, Brady's chief legal officer explained. But we restructured their operations to maximize efficiency while meeting all federal guidelines. Federal guidelines that your lobbying team helped water down, Cassia said quietly, setting down her fork. Conversations around the table faltered. Brady shot his daughter a warning glance she deliberately ignored. "Our government relations team ensures we have a voice in reasonable regulatory frameworks," he said evenly. "That's standard practice in any industry." "Is exploiting indigenous land rights also standard practice?" Cassia's voice remained calm, but her eyes flashed with challenge. "Or dumping processing chemicals into watersheds?" The room grew uncomfortably silent. Even servers froze in place, sensing the tension crackling between father and daughter. "Cassia," Brady said, his tone controlled but tight, "this isn't the appropriate venue for truth." She looked around the table at the executives who avoided her gaze. "When is the appropriate time to discuss how Donovan subsidiaries have violated environmental protections on 3 continents?" or how your Mexican manufacturing plants have blocked union organizing through intimidation tactics. Aster placed a cautioning hand on Cassia's arm, but she was beyond restraint. Months of research, years of growing disillusionment, and a lifetime of unresolved grief fueling her words. "I've read the internal reports your compliance team buried," she continued, addressing the executives directly now. "I've interviewed workers from your factories. I've seen the environmental impact assessments your PR team rewrote. That's enough." Brady's voice cut through the dining room. "You've made your point." "Have I?" Cassia stood, trembling slightly, "because my point isn't just about corporate malfeasance. It's about moral cowardice, about having the power to create real change, but choosing profit margins instead." Brady rose to face her, their confrontation now unavoidably public. "You think running a global company with 30,000 employees is about simple moral choices? That real-world decisions fit neatly into your campus activism categories? You have no idea what responsibilities I carry." "Responsibility?" Cassia laughed without humor. "Is that what you call hiding behind lawyers and PR statements while communities suffer?" "While communities thrive," Brady countered, his composure slipping. "While people have jobs, pensions, health care. While innovations improve lives. Your idealism is admirable, Cassia, but it's naive. The real world requires compromise." Mom never believed that. The mention of Antonia landed like a physical blow. She believed principles matter more than profits. Brady's face hardened. "Don't presume to tell me what your mother believed. You were a child when she died, and you spent 9 years pretending she never existed." Cassia's voice broke, turning her foundation into a tax write-off while betraying everything she valued. The room collectively held its breath. Even Brady seemed stunned by the raw emotion breaking through his daughter's usually controlled demeanor. "You're upset," he said finally. "We should continue this conversation privately. There's nothing more to say." Cassia gathered her napkin and placed it beside her plate with deliberate precision. "I came here thinking maybe, just maybe, your big announcement would be actual change, real accountability. Instead, it's just another carefully managed transition to protect the Donovan legacy." She turned to Aster, who rose silently beside her. "We're leaving." As they moved toward the door, Brady called after her, "Cassia, don't make a scene. This weekend is important." She paused at the threshold, turning back to face the room of powerful people watching the family drama unfold. "You're right about one thing, Dad. I was naive. I believed the man who taught me to question everything would someday question himself." The heavy door closed behind her with quiet finality. 3 hours later, as Brady attempted to salvage the evening with reassurances to concerned board members, Cassia's open letter appeared simultaneously on multiple social media platforms. The carefully crafted statement began with words that would be quoted in business publications for months to come. "Today I renounce the Donovan name and all it represents. I can no longer reconcile my values with the harm perpetuated by my father's empire. Effective immediately, I will be known by my mother's family name, Venturon, and dedicate my life to repairing the damage Donovan Holdings has caused globally." The post detailed specific allegations against Donovan subsidiaries, included links to documented violations, and announced formation of Green Rise, funded not by inherited wealth, but by people who share my commitment to accountability. It concluded, "To those who profit from exploitation while claiming corporate responsibility, your time of reckoning has come. To my father, I tried for years to reach the man who once taught me to stand for something. I no longer believe that man exists." Within an hour, the post had been shared 50,000 times. In his private study at the Berkshire estate, Brady read his daughter's words in stunned silence. His phone rang continuously. PR team, legal advisors, board members demanding response strategies. He ignored them all, staring instead at a photograph on his desk. Antonia, Cassia, and himself in happier times, their smiles genuine, their future seemingly secure. For a fleeting moment, naked grief crossed his face, a private anguish no business associate would ever witness. Then, with practiced discipline, he composed himself, straightened his jacket, and prepared to face the crisis with the implacable calm that had earned him his quiet coyote reputation. By morning, Donovan Holdings had issued a measured statement expressing disappointment in Ms. Donovan's characterizations while affirming commitment to continuing our industry-leading environmental and labor practices. Brady himself offered no comment when reporters congregated at the estate gates. The retirement announcement proceeded as scheduled, though media attention focused more on the family rift than succession plans. Photographs showed Brady at the podium, expression controlled, voice steady, giving no indication that his world had collapsed the night before. Has a family relationship ever exploded in your life? What would it take for you to forgive someone who publicly humiliated you? Comment below with your thoughts. 2 weeks after the Berkshire confrontation, Cassia Ventron sat cross-legged on the floor of a tiny Portland apartment, surrounded by laptops, grant applications, and empty coffee cups. The space doubled as Greenrise headquarters, a far cry from the gleaming Donovan Holdings offices that occupied 30 floors of prime Manhattan real estate. We hit 20,000 followers, Astor announced, glancing up from their computer. The crowdfunding campaign passed $100,000 this morning. Cassia nodded, too exhausted for celebration. She hadn't slept properly since the night she'd walked out of her father's dinner party. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, the momentary flash of hurt before his expression hardened into the impenetrable mask she'd grown to resent. This isn't about him, she reminded herself daily. This is about the work. And there was plenty of work. Greenrise launched with 3 ambitious programs: corporate accountability campaigns targeting environmental violations, community-based reforestation initiatives, and legal support for communities affected by industrial pollution. Operating on a shoestring budget with staff of passionate volunteers, Cassia worked 18-hour days, fueled by determination that sometimes felt indistinguishable from anger. Her public disavowal of the Donovan name attracted media attention that she leveraged strategically. Each interview focused on Greenrise's mission rather than family drama, though journalists inevitably asked about her father. "My personal relationships aren't relevant to our work," became her standard response. "I'm here to discuss environmental justice, not family matters." Privately, she blocked her father's number, returned his letters unopened, and instructed Greenrise staff to decline any contact from Donovan Holdings representatives. The clean break she'd orchestrated allowed no room for second thoughts or reconciliation. 3,000 miles away, Brady Donovan presented a public image of unshakable composure. In the weeks following Cassia's departure, he accelerated his work schedule, starting days at 5 a.m. and ending well past midnight. Board members who privately questioned whether personal distress might affect his leadership found him more focused than ever, coldly efficient, ruthlessly decisive. "If anything, he's sharper," his CFO commented during a closed-door executive meeting, though considerably less patient. Indeed, Brady's legendary calm had given way to a harder edge. Executives who delivered disappointing results faced unprecedented criticism. Tolerance for bureaucratic delays vanished. The retirement timeline announced at the Berkshire gathering extended by 3 years, a decision Brady communicated to the board without explanation or discussion. At his Manhattan penthouse, staff noticed changes too subtle for business associates to detect. Meals returned to the kitchen untouched. Antonia's photographs, previously displayed throughout the home, disappeared into storage. The rooftop garden she had designed, Cassia's favorite retreat during her teenage years, fell into neglect when Brady instructed the landscapers to just maintain the basics. 6 months after the public break, media interest in the Donovan family rift subsided as other scandals captured public attention. Greenrise secured its first major victory when investigations sparked by Cassia's allegations led to a consent decree requiring a Donovan subsidiary to pay $42 million for Clean Water Act violations. Brady offered no comment beyond a company statement acknowledging the settlement without admission of wrongdoing. By the 1-year mark, the separation between father and daughter had calcified into an unquestioned reality. Neither spoke the other's name publicly. Board members knew better than to mention Cassia in Brady's presence. Greenrise staff referred to Donovan Holdings only as the corporation during strategy meetings. But beneath the surface, invisible fractures spread in both their lives. For Cassia, Success brought unexpected complications. As Green Rise expanded, managing 30 full-time staff and hundreds of volunteers across multiple campaigns, administrative demands pulled her away from a hands-on activism that had defined her identity. Fundraising required cultivating wealthy donors, the very power brokers she'd once criticized. Organizational growth necessitated compromise, strategic patience, and delayed gratification, lessons her father had tried to teach her years before. "We can't just protest everything," she found herself explaining to younger activists who questioned Green Rise's increasingly nuanced approach. Sometimes change requires working within systems while pushing their boundaries. The irony wasn't lost on her. Meanwhile, Brady's intensified work schedule extracted physical causeless force Owl couldn't overcome. The first signs appeared subtly, a slight tremor in his left hand that he disguised by keeping it in his pocket during presentations. Occasional memory lapses in meetings, covered by his executive assistant. Increasing difficulty maintaining his balance during his morning runs in Central Park. "You should see a doctor," his sister urged during one of her rare visits. "You don't look well, Brady." "I'm fine," he insisted. "Just tired. The Tokyo expansion is demanding." But he wasn't fine. At board meetings, he sometimes lost his train of thought mid-sentence. His legendary handshake, once firm enough to make junior executives wince, had weakened noticeably. The tremor in his left hand spread to his right, making it difficult to sign documents or use his phone. 18 months after Cassia's departure, Brady finally relented to his personal physician's increasingly urgent recommendations and underwent comprehensive neurological testing. The results confirmed what several specialists had suspected: early onset Parkinson's disease, already progressing more rapidly than typical cases. With proper medication and lifestyle adjustments, many patients maintain normal activities for years, the neurologist explained. But stress accelerates symptom progression. "Your current work schedule is literally killing you, Mr. Donovan." Brady received a diagnosis with the same impassive expression he'd maintained through countless business crises. He asked precise, practical questions about treatment options and prognosis. He scheduled follow-up appointments and hired a discreet specialist to administer medications at his home, away from prying eyes. What he didn't do was slow down. If anything, awareness of his condition intensified his drive to complete what he now viewed as his final chapter at Donovan Holdings. New acquisitions, expanded international operations, aggressive growth targets that worried even his most ambitious executives. "I need to secure the company's future," he told his concerned sister. "There's still so much to do." What remained unspoken? With Cassia gone, the company was all he had left. 2 years passed. Green Rise grew into a respected environmental organization with offices in 3 cities. Cassia became a recognized voice in sustainability circles. Her surname change so complete that newer associates never connected her to Donovan Holdings. Brady continued to lead his empire with outward confidence. His increasingly frequent medication breaks explained away as strategic planning sessions. But sometimes the universe forces us to stop running. And for Brady Donovan, that moment came with 3 words no one expects to hear: "I can't breathe." The boardroom of Donovan Holdings occupied the entire 60th floor of their Manhattan headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered commanding views of the city Brady had conquered decades earlier. On this particular Tuesday morning, 62 executives gathered for the quarterly strategy presentation, a ritual that traditionally showcased their CEO's legendary command of global operations. Brady stood at the head of the massive oak table, impeccably dressed as always. If anyone noticed a slight tremor in his hands as he arranged his presentation materials, they attributed it to the triple espresso at his elbow. If his complexion seemed paler than usual, the harsh fluorescent lighting took the blame. Q3 projections exceed targets by 17%, Brady began, his voice steady despite the increasing effort required to control it. European acquisitions are proceeding ahead of schedule, with particular strength in... He paused, momentarily losing his train of thought. The room waited respectfully. These brief hesitations had become more common in recent months, though no one dared comment. Brady gripped the edge of the table, suddenly aware of an unfamiliar sensation, as if the room were tilting beneath his feet. The projection screen behind him blurred, numbers dancing in his vision. The German subsidiary shows particularly strong. He continued, pushing through the disorientation. Then came the crushing pressure in his chest, the strange numbness spreading down his left arm, the words that formed in his mind but refused to reach his mouth. His chief operating officer frowned, stepping forward. "Brady, are you all right?" Brady opened his mouth to assure them he was fine, that they should continue, that Donovan executives didn't stop for minor discomfort. Instead, he heard himself say in a voice barely recognizable as his own, "I can't breathe." The room erupted in controlled chaos. His executive assistant called for an ambulance while the company's general counsel cleared the room. Brady found himself horizontal on the boardroom table, his crisp white shirt now open, his Italian tie cut away by the company physician, who monitored his pulse with growing concern. "Stay with us, Mr. Donovan," the doctor urged, her voice fading in and out as Brady's consciousness wavered. His last thought before darkness claimed him was oddly personal for a man who had built his reputation on ruthless compartmentalization. Who will tell Cassia? He woke in a private hospital suite, machines beeping steadily around him, his sister Margaret dozing in a chair beside the bed. The clock read 3:17 a.m. "Maggie," he whispered, his voice rough. She jerked awake immediately. "Thank God. They weren't sure when you'd regain consciousness." "What happened?" "You collapsed during the board meeting. Combination of factors. Extreme exhaustion, stress, and—" She hesitated. "And Parkinson's," he finished for her. "They know now, don't they?" Margaret nodded. The neurologist had to explain to the cardiologist. "The board has been informed." Brady closed his eyes briefly. The secret he'd guarded so carefully for nearly a year had been exposed in the most public way possible. The carefully constructed illusion of invulnerability shattered. The company— "Can wait," Margaret interrupted firmly. "The doctors are clear. Your condition has accelerated dramatically due to overwork and stress. If you don't make significant lifestyle changes immediately, the prognosis is—" Her voice caught. "How bad?" "Bad enough that you need to listen to me for once in your stubborn life." Tears filled her eyes. "You're killing yourself, Brady. And for what? Another acquisition? Another billion? What's the point if you're not here to see it?" The question lingered in the sterile hospital air, unexpectedly profound. 3 days later, Brady Donovan formally announced his immediate retirement. The press release cited health concerns requiring full attention without specifying details. The board appointed his long-groomed successor as interim CEO, while stock prices wobbled then stabilized. For the first time in 30 years, Brady woke without a schedule dictated by global markets. The penthouse that had served primarily as a sleeping location between workdays now stretched around him with cavernous emptiness. 24 hours contained an eternity when not parceled into 15-minute meeting blocks. "What would you like to do today, sir?" his housekeeper asked on the third morning of his retirement. Brady had no answer. Weeks passed. Physical therapy and medical appointments provided some structure, but the vast stretches between them yawned with unfamiliar silence. Brady found himself wandering the penthouse at odd hours, opening drawers and closets he hadn't explored in years. In Cassia's former bedroom, maintained exactly as she'd left it for college, he discovered a box of her undergraduate research papers. Sitting on the edge of her bed, he began reading her analysis of corporate environmental impact assessment models. Her clear, incisive writing revealed a mind both analytical and passionate, a combination he recognized from his own younger self. The paper received an A+, with the professor's comment, "Exceptional work that bridges theoretical frameworks with practical applications. Your proposed accountability metrics could transform industry standards." Brady read until dawn, moving from academic papers to blog posts, from her honors thesis to early Green Rise mission statements. As the sun rose over Manhattan, casting long shadows across Cassia's abandoned room, a new emotion stirred in him, something beyond pride or regret. Doubt. Not doubt in Cassia's convictions. Her research was meticulously sourced, her arguments logically sound. Rather, doubt in the certainty that had defined his own career, the unquestioning belief that growth equaled progress, that regulatory compliance was sufficient ethical standard, that shareholder value trumped all other considerations. What if she was right? The question, once admitted, couldn't be dismissed. It followed him through increasingly sleepless nights and quiet days. It echoed in the empty spaces where business calls once filled every moment. It whispered beneath the tremors that medication could dull but not eliminate. 2 months into his retirement, Brady called his former executive assistant, the only person besides his sister who had direct access to his private number. "Janet, I need a favor. Completely confidential." "Of course, Mr. Donovan." "I want to hire an independent environmental and labor practices audit of every Donovan Holdings subsidiary. Not our usual firms. Someone with no connection to the company. Someone who would work for Greenrise." Silence greeted his request. "Janet." "I'm here, sir. Just surprised. The board won't be pleased with an outside investigation they didn't authorize. The board doesn't need to know. This is personal." "May I ask why, sir?" Brady gazed out the city below, where dozens of buildings bore his name, monuments of ambition that suddenly seemed hollow. "Because I need to know if my daughter was right. The audit took months. Comprehensive evaluations of practices across 5 continents, dozens of subsidiaries, hundreds of facilities." Brady reviewed each report personally, his medical tremors forgotten as he absorbed documented violations far beyond what Cassia had alleged in her public statements. Worker safety protocols ignored in Asian manufacturing plants. Environmental impact statements falsified in South American operations. Community displacement concerns buried by legal teams. Union-busting tactics employed systematically across multiple divisions. Most disturbing, evidence that mid-level and senior executives had deliberately hidden these issues from him, creating elaborate reporting structures that filtered out problems before they reached his desk. "I built this," he whispered to the empty penthouse as he reviewed the final summary report. "I created the culture that made this possible." The realization broke something open in him, a dam of certainty that had held back questions too threatening to consider throughout his career. As painful truth flooded in, Brady faced the hardest question of all. What now? The man who had built his reputation on decisive action sat paralyzed by the scope of the wrongs requiring remedy. The system he had created was too vast, too complex for simple solutions, and he was no longer in control. Or was he? Brady opened his laptop and began typing, slowly, fighting the tremors in his hands with each keystroke. The document that emerged by morning wasn't a business plan or acquisition strategy. It was a confession, a detailed accounting of every violation the audit had uncovered, every ethical failure the company had hidden, every harm that had been done in the Donovan name. At the bottom, he typed his signature and the words that would transform everything. "I take full responsibility." The next morning, he called his attorney with instructions that would shock the business world, infuriate the board directors, and represent the first genuine step toward the only thing that mattered now, making things right. "Mr. Donovan, with all due respect, this is corporate suicide." Brady's attorney of 25 years, Eleanor Voss, stared at him across her office desk, the comprehensive audit report open between them. In her decades representing corporate titans, she'd never seen anything like what Brady was proposing. "Perhaps," Brady acknowledged, his trembling hands wrapped around a water glass to steady them. "But it's the right thing to do. The right thing will destroy shareholder value, trigger dozens of lawsuits, potentially result in criminal investigations, and decimate the company you spent your life building," Eleanor countered. "Not to mention your personal liability. I'm aware of the consequences." Eleanor studied her longtime client. Try to reconcile this man with the calculating strategist she'd known for decades. "Is this about your daughter?" she asked finally. "Because there are less destructive ways to make amends." "It's about the truth," Brady replied. "A truth I should have discovered years ago." The truth was worse than even Cassia had alleged. The independent audit revealed a corporate culture that had evolved to protect Brady from bad news, while middle management engaged in increasingly questionable practices to meet ambitious targets. The report documented systematic abuses. In Malaysia, Donovan manufacturing facilities routinely dumped chemical waste into local waterways after midnight shifts, affecting fishing villages downstream. Executives falsified environmental compliance reports while paying off local officials. In Chile, the company's mining subsidiary had knowingly encroached on protected indigenous lands, using complex holding companies to hide the connection to Donovan Holdings. In 12 states, Donovan warehousing operations maintained dual payroll systems that misclassified workers to avoid overtime requirements and health care benefits. Most damning, evidence that 6 senior vice presidents had orchestrated a sophisticated information filtering system they called Firewall Protocol, explicitly designed to keep Brady insulated from operational details that might trigger his rare but formidable anger. The boss wants results, not excuses. One executive had written in an email uncovered by auditors, "Our job is to deliver numbers, not problems. What he doesn't know won't hurt his conscience or our bonuses." The revelation shattered Brady's last offenses. The corruption hadn't happened despite his leadership. It had flourished because of it. His demand for results without excuses, his willingness to delegate without oversight, his famous disinterest in operational details, all had created perfect conditions for ethical decay. "I made this possible," he told his sister Margaret over dinner, pushing food around his plate without eating. "I built a system that rewarded results at any cost, then looked away from the methods." "You're not responsible for others' choices," Margaret argued. "A leader is responsible for the culture they create," Brady countered. Cassia understood that. I dismissed her concerns as naive idealism, but she saw what I refused to see. 3 weeks after receiving the final audit report, Brady put his plan into action. Without informing the board of directors, he sent the complete findings to 3 entities: the Securities and Exchange Commission, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Department of Justice. Simultaneously, he released a public statement that landed like a bomb in financial markets. "Today I am disclosing systematic ethical failures throughout Donovan Holdings operations, failures that occurred under my leadership and for which I take full personal responsibility. I have provided comprehensive documentation to appropriate regulatory agencies and will cooperate fully with any resulting investigations. Effective immediately, I am establishing an independent ethics oversight committee with full authority to implement reforms throughout all company operations, regardless of financial impact." The statement concluded with words no one ever expected from a famously unapologetic CEO. "To communities harmed by our operations, to workers denied fair treatment, to environments damaged by our negligence, I offer no excuses, only my profound apology and commitment to make amends." The reaction was immediate and severe. Donovan Holdings stock plummeted 37% in a single day. The board of directors called an emergency meeting and voted to distance the company from Brady's unauthorized and irresponsible actions. 6 senior executives resigned within hours. Shareholders filed the first class action lawsuit before markets closed. Financial news networks ran continuous coverage of what commentators called the most spectacular corporate self-immolation in history. Business schools prepared case studies on the Donovan disaster. Former allies in corporate America publicly questioned Brady's mental competence, suggesting his health condition had impaired his judgment. Through it all, Brady maintained absolute calm, the eye of a hurricane he had deliberately unleashed. "Are you watching this?" his sister asked, gesturing toward the television where a panel of analysts debated whether Brady could face criminal charges for his role in the corporate misconduct. "No," Brady replied honestly. "I'm reading Cassia's undergraduate thesis again. Her solution for corporate accountability was elegantly simple: transparency enforced by independent oversight with real authority. That's what I'm implementing now." The personal cost mounted quickly. Brady's net worth, once estimated at $17 billion, contracted by nearly half as Donovan Holdings stock continued its free fall. Former friends and business associates stopped returning calls. The board formally censured him, stripping away his remaining honorary titles. But for every door that closed, another unexpectedly opened. Environmental activists, once his most vocal critics, cautiously praised his unprecedented transparency. Labor organizers noted that his actions, whatever the motivation, had done more for worker rights than years of protests. Legal experts pointed out that his voluntary disclosures, while devastating to the company, demonstrated genuine contrition that might mitigate penalties. 6 weeks into the crisis, as regulatory investigations accelerated and media attention intensified, Brady announced the creation of the Antonia Initiative, a $250 million trust dedicated to environmental restoration and community development in regions harmed by Donovan operations. The initiative will operate independently, he explained in a rare press conference. I will provide funding but have no control over disbursements or project selection. An oversight board comprising environmental scientists, community representatives, and ethics experts will make all decisions. A reporter shouted from the back, "Is this an attempt to rebuild your reputation, Mr. Donovan?" Brady considered the question seriously before answering. "No," he said finally. "This is an attempt to rebuild something more important than my reputation, my humanity." After the press conference, Brady's phone displayed a notification he'd never expected to see, a single tweet from Cassia, her first public acknowledgement of his existence since her departure. Corporate accountability requires more than words, but acknowledgement of harm is the necessary first step toward justice. I'm watching with cautious hope, not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but an open door where only walls had stood before. What would you sacrifice to make things right with someone you've lost? Would you give up wealth, power, or reputation? Double tap, like if you believe it's never too late to change your legacy. "Congratulations on the Mackenzie grant," Astor said, sliding a bottle of champagne across the kitchen counter of what was now Greenrise's actual office, no longer cramped apartment where they'd started 2 years earlier. $5 million. Your biggest win yet. Cassia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's Greenrise's win, not mine." "You're allowed to take some credit," Astor reminded her gently. 2 years ago, we were operating on credit cards and hope. Now Greenrise occupied a renovated warehouse in Portland's industrial district. 37 full-time staff coordinated hundreds of volunteers across reforestation projects, legal advocacy campaigns, and corporate accountability initiatives. Their first lawsuit against a multinational corporation had resulted in a landmark settlement. Their community garden program had transformed vacant lots in 12 cities. Environmental policy experts now returned Cassia's calls immediately. By any measure, Greenrise was succeeding beyond Cassia's most ambitious plans. Yet as she stood by the window of her modest office, watching staff members collaborate in the open workspace beyond, something hollow persisted beneath her professional satisfaction. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Donovan Holdings establishes $50 million fund for worker restitution. Another initiative from her father. Another piece of evidence that the transformation she'd witnessed from afar over the past 4 months wasn't just an elaborate PR stunt. She should have felt vindicated. The man who had dismissed her concerns for years was now implementing changes more extensive than she'd ever demanded. The corporate accountability she'd fought for was happening at a scale no activist could have forced through protests alone. Instead, she felt lost. "Have you read his latest statement?" her communications director had asked earlier that day, sliding a transcript across the conference table. "He's dismantling the entire executive compensation structure and tying leadership bonuses to verified environmental and labor metrics. It's exactly what you propose in your thesis." Cassia had nodded professionally. "Good. It's about time." But alone in her apartment that night, she pulled out journals from years earlier, writings from her college days when her anger at her father had crystallized into academic theories about corporate reform. Page after page contained the very solutions Brady was now implementing across Donovan Holdings. "I want to hate him," she admitted to Astor over dinner. "It was easier when he was a villain in the story." "Maybe there are no villains," Astor suggested. "Just people making mistakes, learning too late, trying to fix what they've broken. Or maybe this is an elaborate strategy to rehabilitate his image while preserving the system." But even as she voiced a cynical interpretation, Cassia struggled to believe it. The man who had exposed his own company's wrongdoing, who had voluntarily triggered investigations that could result in personal legal jeopardy, who had accepted public humiliation and the collapse of his reputation. That man wasn't following any corporate crisis management playbook she'd ever studied. 3 months into Brady's corporate reformation campaign, the media narrative began shifting. Donovan's redemption replaced Donovan's downfall in headlines. Ethics professors cited his transparency as a case study in corporate accountability. Former critics cautiously acknowledged the substance behind his symbolic gestures. Green Rise staff increasingly brought Cassia news articles about her father, watching her reaction carefully. She maintained professional detachment, focusing conversations on verifiable changes rather than Brady's personal transformation. "We'll continue monitoring compliance," she insisted during strategy meetings. "Actions matter more than announcements." But privately, doubts crept in. Moments from her childhood surfaced unexpectedly. Her father teaching her to analyze problems, to question assumptions, to stand up for her beliefs. Had she judged him too harshly? Had grief over her mother's death calcified into an unforgiving standard no human could meet? Then came the images from his most recent press appearance. Brady looking gaunt, his hands visibly trembling as he announced another major initiative. The business publications delicately referenced his health challenges, without specifying details. Cassia found herself researching Parkinson's disease late at night, recognizing symptoms she glimpsed in those brief television appearances. The progressive nature of the condition, the accelerating effects of stress, the limited treatment options. "He's really sick," she told Astor, closing her laptop at 2 a.m. "And he's spending what time he has left dismantling everything he built." "Maybe that's exactly why he's doing it," Astor suggested. "When time becomes precious, priorities clarify." The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered to Green Rise offices by private courier. The envelope bore no return address, but Cassia recognized the handwriting immediately. Though it was shakier than she remembered, the precise penmanship of her childhood now marked by the tremors of his condition. She waited until evening to open it, sitting alone on her apartment balcony as rain fell softly on Portland's skyline. Inside was a single page of heavy stationery, the Donovan Holdings letterhead crossed out with a single pen stroke. "I have looked for monsters in the world and found them inside myself. I am proud of the woman you are, one I can never claim to have shaped, but maybe hurt deeply. Forgive me if you can. If not, may your gardens and forests outgrow my mistakes." No manipulative appeals, no excuses, no request beyond the possibility of forgiveness. Just raw honesty from a man who had built his career on calculated control. Cassia read the letter 7 times, each reading revealing something she hadn't fully absorbed before. By the 8th reading, tears blurred the words into indistinct shapes. 3 days later, she called the private number included at the bottom of the page. "This isn't reconciliation," she said when Brady answered, his voice startling her with his frailty. "Just a conversation." "That's more than I deserve," he replied. "There's a community garden in Brooklyn, the Antonia Memorial Garden, on the site of your former chemical storage facility." A pause. "I know it. I funded the remediation anonymously. I'll meet you there next Tuesday, noon." But what waited for Cassia at the Antonia Memorial Garden wasn't just her father. It was the truth about her mother's final wishes. The Antonia Memorial Garden occupied a single acre in Brooklyn, where Donovan Chemical Storage Facility No. 7 once stood. 6 years earlier, community activists had fought for the land's remediation after contamination concerns emerged. Now raised beds of vegetables and native plants replaced concrete foundations and chain-link fencing. Cassia arrived early, walking the narrow gravel paths between spring plantings. Young fruit trees, barely taller than a child, stood in organized rows where tanker trucks once parked. Volunteer gardeners worked quietly, few recognizing the woman whose mother's name graced the entrance sign. At precisely noon, a simple black sedan pulled up to the curb. The driver helped his passenger from the back seat, a man Cassia barely recognized. Brady Donovan had always been impeccably groomed, his tailored suits and commanding presence defining his public image. The man who carefully made his way toward her wore jeans and a simple button-down shirt that hung loosely on his diminished frame. His silver hair, longer than she remembered, caught the spring breeze. Most striking was how he moved, each step deliberate, his left hand trembling visibly despite obvious effort to control it. Cassia had prepared herself for anger, for defensive posturing, for the corporate mask he'd worn throughout her childhood. She hadn't prepared for fragility. They stood 3 feet apart, neither moving to embrace or even shake hands. "You look well," Brady said finally, his voice softer than she remembered. "You don't," Cassia replied, then immediately regretted her bluntness. To her surprise, Brady laughed, a genuine sound she hadn't heard in years. Direct as always. Your mother's quality. An elderly gardener approached, offering a weathered smile. "Would you folks like to see the herb spiral? Just finished planting it yesterday." They accepted the invitation, following him down a winding path. The awkward tension eased slightly as they walked, the garden offering neutral territory for their first steps toward conversation. "The soil here tested clean 2 years ago," Brady commented, stopping beside a raised bed of leafy greens. "I had independent verification done. The remediation was thorough." "You paid for it?" Cassia asked, though she already knew the answer. Anonymously, it seemed appropriate. Why anonymous? Perfect PR opportunity, especially back then. Brady leaned against his cane, considering her question seriously. "Because some things shouldn't be about image. Your mother taught me that, though I didn't listen nearly enough." They continued walking, eventually finding a bench beneath a young apple tree, its first blossoms just beginning to open. "When were you diagnosed?" Cassia asked, gesturing toward his trembling hand. "Officially, about 18 months ago. But I knew something was wrong well before that." "Why didn't you tell me?" The question contained multitudes. About their estrangement, about his secrecy, about the distance that had grown between them long before her public disavowal. "Would you have cared?" Brady asked quietly. The honesty of the question struck her. "Yes," she admitted. "Whatever our differences, I would have wanted to know." Brady nodded, accepting her answer without pushing for elaboration. They sat in silence, watching volunteers turn compost several yards away, the rhythmic work creating background motion to their stillness. "I've been following Greenrise progress," Brady said eventually. "The reforestation initiative in Oregon is particularly impressive. 30,000 trees in a single season. We're aiming for 100,000 next year. You'll exceed that easily with a Mackenzie grant. Congratulations, by the way." Cassia wasn't surprised he knew about the grant. Brady had always maintained comprehensive awareness of his areas of interest. What surprised her was a genuine pride in his voice, without a trace of the condescension that had colored his earlier reactions to her environmental work. "Thank you," she said simply. A young man approached, carrying 2 paper cups. "Ms. Venturon, we made fresh herb tea from the garden. Thought you and your guests might like some." They accepted the offering, the aromatic steam rising between them. Another silence followed, but the quality had shifted, less tense, more contemplative. "I read all of it," Brady said, his eyes on the garden rather than her face. "Your research papers, the Greenrise Manifesto, your proposals for corporate accountability standards." Cassia raised an eyebrow. "Quite a reading list." "You were right." The words emerged with visible effort. "Not about everything, but about what matters most. I built a system that valued growth above all else, then acted surprised when it grew in directions I claimed to disapprove of." "You weren't alone in that," Cassia acknowledged, surprising herself with a concession. "Every major corporation operates the same way. That doesn't make it right." Another silence, punctuated by birdsong from nearby trees. "Why now?" Cassia asked finally. "After all these years, why the sudden enlightenment? Is it because you're sick?" Brady considered the question, his trembling hands wrapped around the warm paper cup. "Partly," he admitted. "Mortality has a way of clarifying priorities. But it started before the diagnosis, when I finally had time to really read what you'd written. To think about what your mother would say about the company I built in her absence." He gestured toward a volunteer helping a child plant seedlings. "To see places like this and recognize that they matter more than quarterly projections." Cassia studied her father's profile, noting the new lines around his eyes, the slight slump of shoulders that once carried the weight of a global corporation without visible effort. "I want to believe you," she said. But corporate history is filled with deathbed conversions that fade once the crisis passes. I don't have the luxury of waiting for you, believe me, Brady replied, the tremor in his hand emphasizing his words as tea splashed over the cup's edge. The doctors give me perhaps 5 good years before the symptoms become debilitating. Whatever I'm going to make right, I need to do it now. The naked honesty silenced her practiced skepticism. This wasn't the calculating businessman she'd grown up watching, measuring every word for maximum advantage. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he continued, or reconciliation. I just wanted you to know that you changed things. Your courage forced me to see what I'd been avoiding for decades. Cassia felt tears threatening and blinked them back. I didn't do it for you. I know. That's what made it effective. A ghost of his old smile appeared. You always were a better strategist than me. A sudden spring shower scattered the gardeners, sending them laughing toward sheltered areas. Brady and Cassia remained on their bench, protected by the young apple tree's canopy as rain pattered against new leaves. There's something else, Brady said, his expression turning serious. Something I discovered during the company-wide investigation. About your mother. Cassia tensed. What about her? Not here, Brady replied, glancing toward departing volunteers. It's complicated and involves legal documents I have back at the hotel. Would you be willing to continue this conversation somewhere private? Suspicion flickered across Cassia's face. The old wearing is returning. What kind of documents? Your mother's actual will. Letters she wrote to you that were never delivered. Evidence of manipulation by people we both trusted. Brady met her eyes directly. I'm not asking you to trust me, Cassia. I'm asking you to verify what I found for yourself. Rain fell harder around them, dripping through the sparse branches of the young tree. In the silence that followed his request, both recognized the crossroads they had reached. Continue separately or take one tentative step towards shared truth. Where are you staying? Cassia asked finally. The West Bridge. Nothing fancy. The medical staff needed a hotel that could accommodate equipment. Cassia nodded slowly. I'll meet you there at 7. Bring everything you found. As they rose to leave, Brady stumbled slightly, his balance affected by the condition he'd hidden for so long. Without thinking, Cassia reached out to steady him, her hand gripping his arm, their first physical contact in years. The moment lasted only seconds before she stepped back, but something had shifted, like soil breaking to allow a seed's first tender growth toward light. The Westbridge Hotel suite reflected Brady's new reality. Medical equipment discreetly positioned near the bedroom, pill bottles organized on the kitchen counter, a hospital-grade adjustable bed visible through an open door. Yet touches of former life remained. Financial reports stacked neatly on the dining table, a laptop open to market analysis, fountain pens arranged precisely beside legal pads. Cassia arrived exactly at 7, still wearing the casual clothes from the garden. Brady had changed into a simple sweater and slacks, his attempt at formality undermined by practical concessions to his condition. Elastic waistband, slip-on shoes, a button-free collar. Thank you for coming, he said, gesturing toward the dining table where several file boxes waited. Would you like something to drink? Just water. Cassia remained standing, surveying the suite with undisguised curiosity. You said you found documents about Mom. Brady nodded, moving carefully to the table. When I began investigating the company, I requested complete access to all legal files, including personal matters handled by corporate counsel. That's when inconsistencies in your mother's estate planning emerged. He opened the first box, removing a leather portfolio. This contains Antonia's actual will, the complete version with all codicils and amendments, not the redacted document executed after her death. Redacted? Cassia took the portfolio, frowning. What does that mean? It means we were both deceived. Brady's expression hardened, a flash of the formidable businessman momentarily visible beneath the illness. By someone who managed both corporate and family legal matters. Someone who saw opportunity in our grief. Cassia opened the portfolio, scanning legal language until reaching passages highlighted in yellow. Hereby designate my daughter, Cassia Antonia Donovan, upon reaching the age of 21 years, as primary trustee of the Donovan Family Foundation, with full authority to direct its mission and disbursements according to her conscience and judgment. She looked up sharply. This isn't what was implemented. No. Brady's jaw tightened. According to the executed will, I retain sole control of the foundation, with provision for your involvement only after completing business education requirements and 10 years corporate experience. Those were never Mom's conditions. Never. Brady opened another folder. This contains the amendment supposedly signed by Antonia 3 days before her death. Note the signature. Cassia examined the document, comparing the signature to others in the file. It's close, but not quite right. Her hands began trembling nearly as much as her father's. Who did this? Richard Kellerman. The name hit like a physical blow. Richard Kellerman. Family friend, trusted legal advisor, the man who had comforted 14-year-old Cassia at her mother's funeral, who had mentored her through college applications, who had remained a sympathetic ear during her early environmental activism. No. She shook her head. Richard wouldn't. He did. Brady slid another document across the table, an internal memo from Kellerman to Donovan Holdings NCFO. Brady remains focused on expansion. The amended foundation structure ensures continued alignment with corporate interests rather than the environmental distractions Antonia favored. The daughter can be managed through education requirements that will redirect her priorities. Cassia sank into a chair, color draining from her face. When did you find this? 3 months ago. I confronted him immediately. Brady's voice remained steady despite the emotion clearly visible in his eyes. He resigned that day. The criminal investigation is proceeding quietly to avoid tipping off his co-conspirators. Co-conspirators? Senior executives who helped him implement the firewall protocol that kept information from reaching me. The same people who benefited from foundation grants being directed to organizations where they held board positions. Brady paused. The same people who intercepted your mother's letters. What letters? Instead of answering directly, Brady opened the third box, removing a bundle tied with faded blue ribbon. The envelopes were addressed in Antonia's distinctive handwriting. For Cassia, to be opened on her 16th birthday. For Cassia, to be opened on her college graduation day. For Cassia, to be opened on her wedding day. And one simply marked, for my daughter, when she needs it most. Cassia reached for them with trembling hands, tears already forming. She wrote to me. Apparently, it was her practice during her final months. Kellerman was instructed to deliver them at the appropriate times. Brady's voice roughened. He claimed they were lost when I asked years later. I found them in his personal safe during the investigation. The hotel suite fell silent as Cassia untied the ribbon and opened the first envelope. Her mother's handwriting filled the page. The same elegant script that had helped a young Cassia learn her letters, that had signed permission slips and birthday cards, that had gradually weakened during those final hospital months. My dearest Cassia, she read aloud, voice breaking. Today you are 16, a young woman with fire in your heart and questions in your eyes. I wish more than anything I could be there to celebrate with you. Brady moved quietly to the window, giving his daughter privacy, while remaining present. Outside, New York continued its evening rush. Lights flickered on across the skyline. People hurrying home, a world continuing despite personal earthquakes happening in hotel rooms above. For nearly an hour, Cassia read in silence, occasionally wiping tears, sometimes laughing softly at her mother's insights or predictions. Brady remained at the window, his own eyes damp, his trembling hands clasped behind his back in a posture that momentarily disguised his condition. Finally, Cassia opened the letter marked, when she needs it most. Her sharp intake of breath drew Brady's attention. She knew, Cassia whispered. Somehow she knew we would end up divided. What does it say? Brady asked quietly. Cassia read aloud. My darling daughter, if you're reading this, you've reached a crossroads. Perhaps with your father, perhaps with your own path forward. The Donovan women have always stood at difficult intersections between conscience and connection. Her voice strengthened as she continued. Your father is a complicated man, brilliant and driven, capable of great vision, but sometimes blind to what matters most. His love for you is absolute, though he may express it in ways that feel more like control than caring. He builds empires because that's the language he knows for creating security. Brady closed his eyes, Antonia's words striking with painful accuracy. You, my fierce girl, speak a different language, one of principle and purpose. Your strength lies in seeing clearly what others ignore, in fighting for what you believe is right. Never lose that clarity. But remember this, righteous anger can calcify into something that hurts only yourself. Cassia paused, struggling to continue. The hardest lesson I've learned is this. Forgive, not for those who hurt you, but so you can choose to be whole. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing. It means refusing to let others' mistakes determine your path forward. The letter concluded, Whatever stands between you and Brady now, remember you are both my heart walking in the world. Find your way back to each other, even if the path looks nothing like you expected. All my love, across time, Mom. The hotel room fell silent, except for the soft sound of Cassia's tears. After a moment, she looked up to find her father weeping openly. The implacable businessman, the quiet coyote, the titan of industry reduced to simple human grief. She knew us both so well, Brady said finally, better than we knew ourselves. Cassia nodded, gently folding the letter. And Kellerman kept these from us. Used Mom's death to manipulate both our lives. Yes. Brady returned to the table, retrieving one final document. There's more. The foundation structure Antonia actually designed, integrating environmental justice with community development. The vision that should have been implemented 9 years ago. Cassia studied the blueprints for what the Donovan Family Foundation was meant to be, precisely the model she had independently developed for Greenrise years later. It's almost identical to what I created, she whispered, as if I somehow knew. You are your mother's daughter, Brady said simply. You found your way to her vision without even knowing it existed. Outside, rain began falling on the Manhattan streets. Inside, father and daughter sat amid scattered evidence of betrayal and manipulation, but also the love that had reached across years to find them exactly when they needed it most. Trust, once shattered, doesn't heal overnight. In the weeks following the revelation of Kellerman's betrayal, Cassia and Brady moved cautiously through unfamiliar emotional territory. There were no dramatic reconciliations, no tearful embraces that erased years of hurt. Instead, small steps, tentative text messages, occasional phone calls, careful questions about each other's work. We're examining the foundation's structure. Brady told her during one such call. Legally, we can restore your mother's original intent. I need time, Cassia replied. Greenrise is my priority. Of course. No pressure, no disappointment in his voice, just acceptance that she would move at her own pace. The criminal investigation into Kellerman and his associates proceeded quietly. 3 executives were indicted for financial misconduct. Evidence emerged of systematic manipulation, extending beyond Antonia's documents to years of corporate malfeasance. Brady cooperated fully with investigators, providing testimony despite his increasingly visible health challenges. He's not using his condition to avoid questioning, a Justice Department official noted privately. Most people in his position would have medical exemptions filed by an army of lawyers. 2 months after their meeting at the West Bridge, Cassia visited the Manhattan penthouse for the first time in years. She came professionally, with 2 Greenrise board members, to discuss potential collaboration between their organization and the reformed Donovan Foundation. Brady welcomed them with understated hospitality, arranging for lunch in the dining room, where their final argument had erupted years earlier. Your proposal aligns perfectly with the Foundation's new direction, he said after their presentation, addressing the board members rather than assuming Cassia needed his approval. The funding can be structured however Greenrise prefers. No strings, no Donovan name attached. Why would you remove your name? One board member asked. Brady glanced briefly at Cassia before answering. Because some work speaks for itself. It doesn't need a family brand to validate it. After the meeting, when her colleagues had departed, Cassia lingered. Brady found her on the rooftop garden, which had been restored to its former beauty. You replanted Mom's favorites, she observed, touching a flowering vine that had been Antonia's particular joy. The garden service had the original plans, Brady explained, leaning heavily on his cane. It should have been maintained all along. They stood in companionable silence, watching the sunset paint Manhattan skyline in shades of amber and rose. "I'm not moving back," Cassia said finally. "Portland is home now. I wouldn't expect you to, but I am considering the foundation position. As independent trustee, not as a Donovan." Brady nodded, careful to contain his obvious pleasure at this development. "The legal team has drafted bylaws ensuring complete autonomy from corporate influence. You'd answer to no one, not me, not the board, not shareholders. I'd want to bring in my own people, environmental scientists, community organizers, labor rights experts. Of course, it's what your mother intended. Summer turned to fall, fall to winter. The pace of rebuilding matched the seasons, gradual, sometimes retreating, but steadily progressing towards something new. Brady stepped further away from public life as his symptoms advanced, requiring more intensive medical support. Cassia established a bicoastal routine, maintaining Greenrise leadership, while assuming increasing responsibility for the reorganized Donovan Family Foundation. They developed a new rhythm of relationship, not the close father-daughter bond of her early childhood, nor the strained formality of her teenage years, but something honest that acknowledged both past wounds and present realities. Brady volunteered at community gardens in Manhattan's underserved neighborhoods, working alongside people who never connected the elderly man with trembling hands to the corporate titan whose name still adorned buildings throughout the city. When Parkinson's made fine motor control impossible, he shifted to teaching business basics to young entrepreneurs from disadvantaged communities. "I'm not the expert anymore," he told Cassia during one of her New York visits. "Just someone with experience to share when asked." Cassia, meanwhile, transformed the foundation from a traditional philanthropic model to an activist powerhouse. Under her leadership, the organization funded legal challenges against corporate polluters, invested in regenerative agriculture in climate-vulnerable regions, and created accountability metrics that became industry standards. She never moved back to the penthouse, never reclaimed the Donovan name, never fully forgave the years of disconnection. But something else emerged, a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation or expectation. At a climate justice conference in Chicago, when asked about her connection to Donovan Holdings, Cassia responded with newly found equilibrium. "My father and I approached the world differently, but we found common ground in the work that matters." Sometimes families rebuild around shared purpose rather than shared history. Brady watched from the audience, pride evident in his eyes despite the increasing dyskinesia that marked his condition's progression. When attendees approached him afterward, he deflected attention toward Cassia's accomplishments rather than claiming credit for her work. "That's all her vision," he told an admiring colleague. "I'm just fortunate to witness it." By the time Brady's condition confined him primarily to the penthouse, their weekly video calls had become a fixture in both their lives. Conversations that ranged from foundation strategies to philosophical debates to occasional reminiscences about Antonia. "Mom would have loved what you've built with Greenrise," Brady observed during one such call. "She would have loved seeing you in that community garden," Cassia countered, "teaching kids about composting instead of corporate takeovers." For the first time in years, they laughed together, a sound Antonia would have recognized as healing's quiet victory. The Manhattan Cathedral overflowed with mourners on a crisp autumn morning. Business leaders, environmental activists, and community members gathered side by side, an unlikely congregation united by connection to one man. In the front row, Cassia Ventron sat straight-backed, her composure betraying little of her inner turmoil as she prepared to eulogize the father she had only truly begun to know in his final years. When Brady Donovan's struggle with Parkinson's ended, he left behind not just buildings bearing his name, but a transformed understanding of corporate responsibility. His final years, marked by humility rather than power, had rewritten his legacy in ways few could have predicted. Cassia approached the podium with measured steps, placing a simple notebook beside the microphone. The cathedral fell silent. "My father built towers that changed skylines," she began, her voice steady. "But his greatest achievement wasn't in steel or glass or corporate acquisitions. It was in his courage to question everything he had built when he recognized its foundations were flawed. She paused, scanning the gathered faces. Executives who had witnessed Brady's corporate dominance, activists who had protested his policies, medical staff who attended his final days with quiet dignity. Many have asked if we reconcile before the end, Cassia continued. That word suggests returning to something that once existed. What my father and I found was not reconciliation, but something new entirely, a relationship built on honest recognition of both our differences and our common ground. She turned a page in her notebook. In his final months, my father said something I'll carry forever. It is possible, no matter our age or mistakes, to start again, to become who we need to be and try, honestly, to do good in the time we have left. Sunlight filtered through stained glass, casting colored patterns across the cathedral floor as Cassia spoke of Brady's transformation. Not as a billionaire's redemption story, but as a human being's difficult journey toward authentic connection. My father and I shared something beyond DNA, she said. We shared stubbornness, conviction, the certainty that our way was right. A gentle smile crossed her face. It took my mother's wisdom, reaching across years through letters she left behind, to help us see that being right matters less than being whole. In the congregation, heads nodded, eyes dampened. Many recognized their own family fractures in the Donovan story, rifts that seemed too wide to cross, words that felt impossible to unsay. What my father taught me in the end wasn't about business strategy or wealth management. He taught me that it's never too late to choose a different path, that admitting mistakes takes more courage than defending them, that legacy isn't what you build, but how you repair what you've broken. As Cassia concluded her remarks, she looked toward the simple wooden box containing her father's ashes. No gold fittings, no corporate logo, just a man himself, finally freed from both wealth burden and disease's constraints. The Donovan name will fade from buildings eventually, she said softly, but I hope the lessons of my father's final chapter will endure, that we might all find the bravery to question our certainties, the humility to begin again, the wisdom to value connection over being right. She placed her hand briefly on the wooden box. Thank you, Dad, for showing how it's done. In the months that followed, the story of Brady and Cassia spread beyond business schools and environmental circles. It reached families divided by politics, by values, by unspoken hurts. It offered no easy answers, no perfect reconciliations, just a quiet possibility that even the deepest wounds might someday heal enough to allow something new to grow. The Donovan Family Foundation, under Cassia's leadership, established programs supporting family mediation in communities torn by environmental conflicts. Greenrise developed corporate accountability frameworks now adopted by companies worldwide. The garden where father and daughter had first begun their tentative reconnection expanded across vacant lots throughout the city. Some family wounds seem impossible to heal, but this story reminds us it's never too late to choose reconciliation over pride. If someone in your life needs to hear this message, share this video now. Subscribe to Soul Igniting Stories for more powerful tales that might just change how you see the world and the people in it. Because sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't measured in dollars or buildings or names that grace corporate headquarters. Sometimes it's found in 3 simple words that change everything. Let's try again. Thank you so much for watching and listening to this extraordinary story here on Soul Igniting Story. I truly appreciate you for taking the time to be with us, to open your heart, and to let these words spark something within your soul. Every story we share is crafted to inspire, to uplift, and to remind us all that love, hope, and resilience are alive in every corner of the world. If this story touched you, made you smile, or even brought a little spark of wonder to your day, I would be so grateful if you would show your support. Please give this video a like. It helps more souls discover these stories. Don't forget to leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, feelings, or even your own experiences connected to the story. Your words make this community come alive. And of course, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next beautiful journey we'll be sharing together. Until next time, thank you again for being part of the Soul Igniting Story family, where every story lights a flame within.